God did not create you. You have been creating God with every assumption. Neville Goddard taught that the moment you say, I am, you are not describing a God far off in the heavens. You are naming the very God you have been quietly creating with every thought you have ever called true about yourself. In the book of Exodus, Moses stands before the burning bush and asks the voice, "What shall I tell them your name is?" And the voice answers, "I am that I am. Tell them I am has sent me to you." This is Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. And Neville Goddard would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? This is not a title handed to a distant ruler somewhere above the clouds. This is a description of your own bare awareness of being. And whatever word you quietly place after those two words, I am, becomes the God you serve into form. You assumed all along that your circumstances were describing you, when the truth was the reverse the entire time. You were describing them into existence. And that single misunderstanding is the very thing that has kept so many good and sincere prayers unanswered. Say it with me. I am the source of every state I have ever lived in. I am the unseen power moving behind my own life. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am the source of every state I have ever lived in. I am the unseen power moving behind my own life. Imagination creates my reality. If something in you just went quiet as you heard that, type the two words "it's done" in the comments below and let it be your seal. Subscribe now if you would like tomorrow's teaching to find you the same quiet way this one did. The first key is this. Every state you occupy is a name you have given to God, and the God of your life answers only to the name you call it. So when you wake in the morning and your first thought is, "I am tired of this," or "I am always struggling," you have just spoken a new name over your day, and the day bows to that name, because imagination is the only God there is. This is precisely why it is true that God did not create you. You have been creating God with every assumption. It is not that some outside force decided you should struggle. It is that you assumed the state of struggle, and struggle answered when you called. Consider a man who has said for years, "I am just not lucky with money." He says it lightly, almost as a joke over dinner. He does not notice that he is standing at a kind of altar every time he says it, and yet the bills seem to multiply. The opportunities seem to slip past him at the exact moment he reaches for them. He blames the economy. He blames timing. He blames the people who did not follow through. And never once does he suspect that he has been faithfully worshiping at the name he keeps calling. This is not superstition. This is not some vague energy floating through the air. This is the plain mechanics Neville Goddard described. Imagination clothed in feeling becomes fact. And a sentence repeated enough times stops being a sentence and becomes a scripture you live inside of. Think of how differently that same man's life would answer him if every morning, before the day had a chance to speak first, he quietly claimed, "I am the one money flows toward." Not shouted, not forced, simply assumed the way you assume your own name when someone calls you across a room. So today, pause for a moment and pick one real sentence you say about yourself without thinking, the one that slips out so easily you barely notice it anymore. And ask honestly, is this the God I want answering my prayers? Because the moment you notice the name you have been calling, you already hold the power to call another. This is not positive thinking. This is not decoration for a hard week. This is the mechanics of consciousness itself. You are not describing your life when you speak of yourself. You are legislating it. And the sooner you take responsibility for the name you have been calling over your own days, the sooner you stop waiting on a distant heaven and start standing inside the one you have been quietly building all along. I am the namer of my God. I choose a new name today. The second key is this. You are not your state. You are the one who moves through states the way you might walk through rooms in a house. Neville Goddard taught that consciousness is the only reality, while every mood, every circumstance, every identity you have ever worn is simply a room you entered and mistook for yourself. Think of the last time you felt anxious before an important conversation. You did not become anxiety. You entered the state of anxiety and looked out through its window and called everything you saw by its name. The traffic looked worse. The silence from a friend looked colder. The future looked narrower. None of that changed. Only the room you were standing in changed. This is why two people can live through the identical day and walk away with two entirely different worlds. One leaves a meeting certain it went badly. The other leaves certain it went beautifully. And both are correct, because both were simply reporting the state they occupied while they were in it. Notice how easily language betrays this truth. You say I am worried the way you would say I am tall, as though worry were bone and blood. But no one was born worried. Worry is a room. Someone stepped into it this morning and forgot there was a door. Picture a man sitting at his kitchen table, reading a message from his employer. In one state, that message reads as a threat. His chest tightens. His whole day narrows around it. In another state, entered a moment later. The very same words read as simple information. Nothing about the message changed. Only the room he was standing in while reading it changed. This is the quiet architecture behind every mood swing you have ever blamed on circumstance. And it is worth walking through an ordinary day to see how many times you actually change rooms without ever noticing the doorway. You wake, and for a moment, you are simply aware, clear, unclaimed, and then a thought arrives. Another day of the same thing, and you have already stepped into a room without a name tag on the door. By mid-morning, a small delay at work becomes evidence that nothing ever goes your way, and you have wandered into another room down the same hallway. By afternoon, a kind word from a stranger lifts you, without your permission, into a lighter room entirely, and you feel, briefly, that maybe today is different. Notice you did nothing to earn that lift. You simply crossed a threshold. This happens 10, 20 times before dinner, and almost none of it is chosen. It is wandered into the way a sleepwalker wanders through a familiar house. So when you catch yourself thinking, I am the anxious one, or I am the person things always go wrong for, stop and remember, you are not describing your identity. You are only telling me which room you are currently standing inside of, and any room can be left the same way it was entered. Quietly, deliberately, without asking permission from your circumstances. It is not that the room is locked. It is that you forgot you were ever standing outside of it. You do not need the outer day to change first. You only need to notice you have wandered into a room and step back out into the hallway of pure awareness. That hallway is who you actually are. It was who you were before the anxious thought, and it will be who you are after it. Unclaimed, unnamed, free to walk into any room you choose next. Walk into the next hour of your day the way you would walk into a house you already own every room of. Choose the room called peace. Choose the room called I am supported. And stand there long enough to forget you were ever anywhere else. I am not my mood. I am the one who chooses the room. The third key is this. Everyone you meet is you pushed out. Neville Goddard taught that the outer world is not a separate stage filled with strangers acting independently of you. It is a mirror stretched wide across time and space, reflecting back the assumptions you already carry about yourself and about life. And this is one of the hardest keys to receive, because it asks you to stop blaming the mirror for the face it shows you. It is not that people are doing things to you, it is that your own quiet self-concept is doing things through them. Consider the coworker who seems to dismiss you in every meeting. Consider the family member who never seems to notice what you have accomplished. It feels certain they are the problem. It feels certain that if only they changed, your peace would return. But Neville would gently turn you around and ask, what have you been assuming is true about your own worth long before that meeting even began? Because the dismissive coworker did not create your feeling of being unseen. Your feeling of being unseen went looking for a face to wear, and it found theirs. And here is where the key turns further still. This also means the people who love you well, who see you clearly, who celebrate you without envy, are also you pushed out. They are the reflection of an assumption of worth you have allowed yourself to hold, even quietly, even briefly, and it does not stop with the people you know. Even the stranger behind the counter, the one who either lingers to help you or waves you along without a glance, is answering the very same assumption. So, if you want to know what you have secretly been assuming about your own life, do not look at your thoughts, look at your relationships. They are the most honest mirror you own, far more honest than anything you would admit to yourself in words. Walk through one ordinary day with this key in hand. Morning greets you with a curt reply from someone at home. Afternoon brings a stranger who cuts in front of you in traffic. Evening brings a message left unanswered. And by nightfall you conclude the world is cold. But Neville would ask you to notice you arrived at breakfast already carrying the assumption I am overlooked, and the day simply produced witnesses to testify on behalf of the state you brought into the room. None of them conspired. None of them even knew. They were simply cast, the way an actor is cast, to speak lines your own consciousness had already written before the sun came up. Pause for a moment right now and pick one real relationship that troubles you, someone whose coldness or distance you have quietly resented, and ask yourself honestly, without flinching, what have I been assuming about my own worth in this very area, long before this person ever entered the picture? Because the answer to that question is not an accusation, it is a door. It is not that this person must change first. It is that the mirror must be met with a new face for it to have any new expression to return. And this is the living proof that God did not create you. You have been creating God with every assumption. Revise how you see yourself this morning before you meet a single face today. And watch which faces soften without ever being told to, without a single word of explanation passing between you. Because the mirror was never arguing with you, it was only ever agreeing. I am the one who chooses what the mirror reflects. The fourth key is this: revision is how you correct the God you carelessly created. Earlier today, Neville Goddard taught that no day is final until you have gone back through it in imagination and rewritten every scene that did not honor the life you intend to live. Most people believe the day simply happened to them. An unkind word was spoken, a door closed too hard, a chance was missed, and they carry that unaltered scene into sleep as though it were carved in stone. But nothing spoken or witnessed is final until it is sealed by your continued belief in it. It is not that the past is fixed and only the future is open. It is that the past is only as fixed as the attention you keep giving it tonight. Consider a man who spent his whole drive home replaying the moment his manager spoke to him sharply in front of the whole team. He arrived at his front door, still rehearsing it, still defending himself in his mind, still losing the argument a second and third time before dinner was even served. And if he carries that scene to bed exactly as it happened, he is not remembering the day. He is legislating tomorrow to look exactly like it. But suppose instead, before sleep, he closes his eyes and quietly lives the scene again. Only this time, the manager speaks with patience, the room feels warm rather than tight, and he answers with calm instead of a knotted stomach. He does not need the manager to have actually said different words earlier. He only needs to feel, now, that the exchange had gone that way, and hold that feeling gently until it settles the way a stone settles at the bottom of still water. This is not pretending the original moment away. It is refusing to let an old assumption keep convicting your tomorrow before it has even arrived. Do this quietly every night for a single week. Take whichever scene stung you most, the sharp reply from a friend, the meeting that went sideways, the silence that felt like rejection, and instead of replaying it as it happened, imagine it as you wished it had gone. Hear the kinder words, see the warmer face, feel the ease that should have been there, and watch how the very people involved in those scenes begin behaving differently without a word ever passing between you, because you did not revise them, You revise the God inside you that had been quietly convicting them. I am free to rewrite any moment before it becomes my history. If this teaching is opening something in you, subscribe so tomorrow's key finds you. One quiet notification can be the difference between forgetting and living in the end. The fifth key is this, and it is the deepest one. So let us walk through it slowly, in 3 turns. First, consider what it means to live in the end. Neville Goddard taught that most people live in the middle of their story, aware of the problem, aware of the lack, aware of everything that has not yet happened, and they call this being realistic. But he taught something almost scandalous by comparison. He taught that you are meant to live already at the end of the story, feeling the relief, the gratitude, the quiet satisfaction of the wish already fulfilled, not as a fantasy you visit occasionally, but as the very ground you stand on. Imagine a woman waiting for a difficult diagnosis to be resolved. The middle of her story is fear, checking her phone, rehearsing worst outcomes. But living in the end means she feels now, ahead of any evidence, the relief of the good report already received, not gritting her teeth and hoping, but resting the way you rest, after a burden has already been lifted. This is not lying to yourself, it is choosing which end you gather evidence for, because imagination given feeling always goes looking for facts to justify itself. It is not denial of what your eyes report, it is loyalty to what your heart has already decided is true. And this loyalty is the very thing most people never learn to hold. They call it wishful thinking, and abandon it after a single disappointing hour, when in truth it was never meant to be held for an hour. It was meant to be held the way a mother holds a sleeping child, without strain, without checking every few minutes to see if it worked. Second, consider the state akin to sleep. This is the doorway Neville Goddard pointed to again and again as the actual working ground of consciousness. In ordinary waking hours, your senses shout so loudly that imagination struggles to be heard over them. The phone buzzes, the traffic presses in, the conversation at dinner demands your attention, and imagination is pushed to the very back of the room. But in the drowsy moment just before true sleep, the senses grow quiet. The outer world loosens its grip finger by finger, and imagination is left almost alone in the room. This is why he taught that the state akin to sleep is the single most effective condition for impressing a new assumption upon consciousness. Picture a man who has spent years assuming he is passed over for advancement at his work. Every waking hour, that assumption is reinforced by 100 small facts. A comment overheard, a promotion given to someone else, a familiar tightening in his chest each Monday morning. But at night, when he finally lets his body grow heavy and his thoughts slow to almost nothing, he is no longer arguing with the facts of the day. In that hush, he can quietly feel the handshake of congratulation, hear the particular voice of his supervisor saying the words he has longed to hear, feel the settled pride of a man whose work has finally been seen, and because the senses are no longer shouting their evidence against him, that feeling is received without resistance. This is not a bedtime story he tells himself to fall asleep more easily. It is a seed planted in the one soil that always grows exactly what is planted in it. So tonight, instead of scrolling until your eyes finally give out, let yourself grow drowsy on purpose. Let the body settle the way it does in the last minutes before sleep truly takes you. And in that soft, heavy, half-gone state, imagine a small natural scene that could only happen if your wish were already fulfilled. Not a fireworks display of the whole dream at once, but one ordinary detail, a voice congratulating you, a hand resting on your shoulder, a familiar room, but with a new peace inside it. And feel it as real. Feel it the way you would feel it if it were actually happening. And let that feeling carry you the rest of the way into sleep. This state is not a technique you perform, it is a door you slip through. And the door is only ever open for those few honest minutes when you stop insisting on being awake. Third, consider persistence. Because a single beautiful night of imagining is a lovely experience, but it is not yet a conviction. Neville Goddard taught that the assumption must be repeated, returned to, inhabited again and again, until it hardens from a visit into a residence. Think of learning to speak a new language. The first time you say a foreign phrase, it feels foreign in your mouth, awkward, borrowed, not yet yours. But say it daily, live inside it, and one day you notice you are no longer translating. You are simply speaking. This is exactly how an assumption becomes your nature. At first, the feeling of the wish fulfilled will feel like a costume, something you are trying on before bed and taking off again by morning. This is normal, and it is not failure. It simply means the old assumption still has seniority in your consciousness. So you return again the next night, and the next, not out of desperation, but out of quiet loyalty to the end you have chosen. Some nights the old fear will rise up loudly and insist it is still the truth. And on those nights, persistence does not mean arguing with the fear. It means gently returning attention to the small imagined scene, until the fear grows tired of being ignored. This is the quiet discipline no one applauds you for. There is no audience for the minutes you spend growing drowsy with a private feeling of relief. And yet, this unseen discipline is what eventually rearranges the seen world entirely, until one day you catch yourself surprised. The anxious rehearsal you used to run automatically simply does not arise anymore. In its place is a calm expectation you did not have to manufacture. It was already there waiting for you because you had been visiting it faithfully every night in that soft state akin to sleep. This is how a private, invisible practice in the dark becomes a public, undeniable change in the light. No one sees you lying still with your eyes closed, feeling a small imagined scene, and yet everyone eventually sees what that stillness produced. They will call it luck, or timing, or a change of heart in someone else. But you will know it was never luck. It was law quietly working itself out through the one instrument it has always used, your own patient imagination. This is the whole secret held inside the phrase you have heard from the very start of this teaching. God did not create you. You have been creating God with every assumption. And here, in the drowsy dark before sleep, held gently and returned to faithfully, is where that creating is done most powerfully, most quietly and most completely. I live tonight already at the end I have chosen. The sixth key is this, and it is the simplest one to say, though it may be the hardest one to remember. I am is the only God there has ever been operating in your life, not a distant judge weighing your worth from somewhere beyond the clouds, but the very awareness reading these words right now, the same awareness that has been quietly clothing every assumption you have ever held in flesh and circumstance. Neville Goddard taught that once you see this, you can never again honestly say life is happening to you, because you will feel, plainly and undramatically, that life has been answering you the whole time. Consider a man standing at an ATM machine, watching a number appear on a small lit screen, and hear him say under his breath, "I am always broke." He does not notice what he has just done. He has taken the bare awareness of being, the same awareness that named itself before Moses at the bush, and he has hitched it to a small glowing number and called that his God. And that God, obedient as ever, goes to work proving him right. This is not punishment. It is loyalty. Imagination is loyal to whatever name you give it, whether you meant it or not. And this is the tender part of the key, because it means the reverse is just as true and just as immediate. The same man could stand at the very same machine, looking at the very same number, and quietly say instead, "I am provided for," and something in the room would shift, even though nothing on the screen moved yet, because he would no longer be reporting a balance, he would be ordaining one. This is not a technique reserved for temples or sacred hours. It happens at ATM machines, in kitchens, in traffic, in the mirror while brushing your teeth. Every single time you finish the sentence, "I am," you are naming the God who governs your next hour. So today, when you catch yourself about to say, "I am too old for this," or "I am always the one who misses out," pause. Feel the weight of what you are about to ordain, And remember that nothing outside you has been holding you back, and nothing outside you needs to change first before you are allowed to feel at peace. The God you have been searching for in ancient books and borrowed doctrines has been the quiet awareness behind your own eyes, the entire time, patient, unhurried, waiting only to be correctly named, gently, steadily, the way a gardener is responsible for a garden already given rich soil. I am the only God, and I create wisely now. Here is the whole picture. It is not that God made you and left you to figure out the rest. It is that you have been making God, one assumption at a time. Every state you occupy is a name you give the divine, and it answers to that name. You are not the state you are standing in, you are the one who chooses which room to stand in. Every person around you is a mirror stretched out reporting the assumption you already hold. And any scene you do not like can be revised in quiet imagination before it becomes permanent history, and deeper still than all of that, in the soft state akin to sleep, held with feeling and returned to with patience. Any assumption planted there eventually ripens into the very facts of your life, and beneath every one of these 6 keys is really one single key wearing 6 different faces. The recognition that imagination is the only creative power there has ever been, and I am, is simply what that power calls itself when it looks in the mirror. You were never waiting on God to move. God has been waiting, patiently, faithfully, for you to notice you are the one who has been moving all along. If you are ready to stop practicing this occasionally and start living inside it daily, the 21-day reality shift was built exactly for that. 21 mornings and 21 nights walking you gently through living in the end, revising the day, and resting in the state akin to sleep, until assumption becomes nature. It is a small investment, $37, fully guaranteed, and if it does not deepen your practice within the first 14 days, simply ask and receive every cent back. You will find the link in the description below. And if something in you has already decided, before you even click, that this is for you, that is not impatience, that is recognition, that is the very feeling of the wish fulfilled arriving early to greet you. Say it with me one last time. I am the source of every state I have ever lived in. I am the unseen power moving behind my own life. Imagination creates my reality. You did not stumble into this life by accident. You assumed it into being, and it is never too late to assume again. This is what it means that God did not create you. You have been creating God with every assumption